The CHIPS legislation has seemed to already been yielding fruit. I'm sure you remember what was passed to just this summer on a pretty bipartisan basis to incentivize chips manufacturers to reshore, to come back to the United States. A shockingly huge portion of semiconductors, which sounds, again, like I was not paying attention at all to the semiconductor discourse until a couple of years ago. And when you look at exactly how desperately we need semiconductors for our entire economy, let alone our military. That's not even getting into the national security implications. You realize how these chips are crucial to the health of the United States, and a huge swath of them are manufactured in Taiwan. Last week, as the Congress convened over in China, Xi Jinping got his third term and basically signaled that he thinks he should be moving up that timeline on potentially moving in on Taiwan. At least that's the way a lot of China experts read his comments in regard to Taiwan last week, which I think were, they're sort of characteristically and predictably vague. But the China watchers who saw that, said this is an indication that he seems itchy, even more itchy, to move in on Taiwan. So the reshoring efforts in the United States need to happen a whole lot faster. And as it turns out, we don't have a lot of people who are qualified to work in the industry.
Yeah, so we can put this element up, the reporting here from Computer World, which dives into the labor shortage all across the board. The CEOs and the hiring managers interviewed in the story are like, we can't find people for anything.
Yep.
Like we're getting killed. One guy's like, it took me a year searching the world to find this engineer for this position, and then it took 9 months to get the visa approved. 9 months is fast. Like that guy's lucky that they got that through in 9 months. Our immigration policy around this hasn't been updated in 30 years. There are quotas that we have that are capped. That once you've gotten a certain number of people in on these particular visas, that's it. You're done. Nobody else can get through. The backlog because of inadequate funding, plus trying to manage like a 1980s law in a 2020s economy. Plus, and we've talked about this before, it actually matters. No government has ever wanted to invest in like tech upkeep, so they're all running on like. You should see these like computer, like you think you're walking into the set of like a 1980s like movie about like Halt and Catch Fire or something.
But the technology is developed here. That's what's super frustrating.
But the government can't buy it because they're like afraid that the Washington Post is going to catch them like spending money on computers or something.
So a lot of the research.
Yeah, just use Microsoft Word 1. It's fine.
The research that people are using in Taiwan to manufacture these chips that are used in the United States or imported into the United States is American research for the most part, and that's per Computer World's reporting, which is like
done largely by immigrants here at American universities.
It's right. And it's just like an amazing like cycle of just stupidity.
Yeah.
It's just so dumb. And this is what Computer World wrote in July. As Intel, Samsung, TSMC, and others move ahead with plans for new computer chip development and manufacturing plants in the U.S., those efforts are running into a new headwind. There aren't enough people with the skills needed to run facilities. As you mentioned, Ryan, Computer World followed up this month in a report exactly about that and said recent initiatives to bring tech manufacturing back to America are working, according to the Reshoring Initiative. In its report, the group predicted 2022 will see a record 350,000 new jobs directly related to domestic companies bringing work back stateside and offshore companies committing foreign direct investment to their U.S.-based divisions and facilities. All right, so 350,000 new jobs is fantastic. We need people to work in those jobs and then to contribute to the American economy for that number to really be positive. Because if you have 350K new jobs and you can't fill them, well, I don't know what we're going to do, because the Washington Post also just this week said, and the engineering shortage in the U.S. is frustrating the chips industry. Harvard Business Review Here's where it's also terrifying in a new review, said, we found that the time it would take the supply chain to recover or return to normal operations from a 10-day disruption of production at one fab would be nearly 12 months and would create significant financial losses across all supply chain partners. Just a 10-day disruption. So imagine Xi Jinping moves in on Taiwan and manufacturing's, they're saying right now, 12 months. 12 months. We are not remotely equipped for that. We have been just pretending this problem isn't happening for years and years and years. And now we're in a situation where we're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and fixated either whether you think it's rightfully or wrongfully on that front. And Xi Jinping knows that.
So this whole thing reminded me of this fascinating exchange between, and I was able to find it just now, between Trump and Bannon back in 2015. You might remember this interview. Trump was on Bannon's Breitbart radio program, and they had a disagreement over immigration policy. And I'm curious how you think this has shaken out in the 7 years since then. So it starts with Trump saying it's a shame that so many kind of foreign-born Ivy League graduates aren't allowed to stay in America after they graduate because they would be what he called they would be job creators, as he says it, which sounds like a common sense thing anyway. Like, why'd you spend all this money training somebody and then kick them out of the country so they can go take their talent elsewhere?
Although they spend a lot of money getting trained here as well. It's a huge incentive for universities.
Yeah, it's great. We win on every which way. And then Trump sees Bannon like kind of being skeptical, and Trump's like, we have to keep our talented people in this country. And Bannon says, I'm good the transcript there. And Trump says, I think you agree with that. Do you agree with that? And then Bannon says, well, I got a tougher. You know, when 2/3 or 3/4 of the CEOs in Silicon Valley are from South Asia or from Asia, I think my point is a country's more like, a country's more than an economy. We're a civic society. So Bannon's like, no, go home.
So what that perspective misses is that you can walk and chew gum at the same time, meaning that, and that would mean basically that if you want one part of it, you have to have the other part of it. So we should have a strong civic culture, and we should do things to make that more robust. There's no question about it. But we don't have a choice. We really do not have a choice at this point. If we are at a situation right now at this very moment where if something were to disrupt for 10 days, just manufacturing of semiconductors, they're like, what's a good example? I mean, it's like a domino, right? Or just it's something that you pull that one thread out of the fabric and it all starts to unravel. That's what they are to our supply chain. Even though they sound like this, abstruse concept that tech people only care about, these things are crucial.
There'll be a metaphor in the future.
Yeah.
People will be like, it'll be like taking the chip out.
I don't want that to happen, but I think it's going to. So that's the point that you have to make to people who, and I think, again, there's like sort of reasons for skepticism about contributing to the American project, the American economy, if you don't really care that much about America, if it's just all about money, and that maybe what Steve Bannon thinks the situation is. The bottom line is we don't have a choice, and you can do more to cultivate that sense of sort of patriotism anyway.
Yeah. And so the CHIPS legislation is throwing money at it, and we'll see whether the multinational corporations involved here just keep the money or actually invest it here. There's some evidence that they're already sending it offshore.
Yeah.
The second question is immigration. Can we get people here? The 2B would be, can we actually create more of a domestic supply of these workers? Like, can we actually start doing STEM education better? Can we make our own pipelines? But the third part is this rather radical move that Biden made just before Xi's speech, and we've talked about, Crystal and Sagar have talked about this here, but this is his export control ban on chip technology. People who follow this industry just completely shocked to see such an aggressive move. It's saying these high-tech chips, which China does not yet have the tech capacity to produce, but is trying to, you cannot export these anymore. Like it's a huge, dramatic ratcheting up.
Did we do that first to them?
Well, Yes, they have.
Yeah.
I mean, they mess around with us all the time.
Yeah.
Like they messed around with our solar panel stuff, but we have never done anything this severe around export controls. And it's giving, people say, well, this might make him invade Taiwan earlier. Other people say that the fact that he's going to do it anyway means that you cannot be exporting this technology that will give them a quantum leap in their military and other economic capacity. Quick story. I know we got to move on to the next one. There's this book that I think is like everybody should read if they're curious about this, called The Long Game by this guy Rush Doshai, that sketches out. That's kind of takes a pretty gives a hawkish lens to the U.S.-China relationship, and really examines what it is that is the Chinese government's long-term strategy. And he's kind of so hard-edged and clear-eyed about it that a couple months ago I was like, I got to have this guy. After I finished the book, I was like, I got to have this guy on my podcast. I want to hear from him. So I reached out to somebody to Stoller who knows him, and he's like, he's at the NSC now. So he now is the director of China policy at the National Security Council for Biden. And having read that book, it is a remarkable fact that the U.S., which has been so dovish from both parties for so long toward kind of cooperation with China, permanent trade relations, et cetera, has somebody with this kind of perspective on them. And so when this was announced, when Jake Sullivan announced this chip export ban, he said this is 100% national security decision. This is not about an economic decision. So we'll see if this becomes bipartisan, but this is a new kind of era in U.S.-China relations.
Well, and that's what's pathetic, is that it took essentially an emergency, to wake the United States up, and to, reshoring should hopefully bring with it a host of economic and national security benefits and cultural benefits along with those economic benefits, meaning you can have more company towns organized around these areas that have really good jobs, and that sort of have the ripple effect going out from there. But again, these things did not just go to China in like a case of happenstance. Like, this was an intentional thing, like moving manufacturing of these to Taiwan, moving manufacturing or letting so much manufacturing go to China. This stuff happened as
doing it all on Taiwan. What are you thinking when you know like where this is headed?
Well, they did it.
Nobody 30 years ago was like, are we sure that this island right off China's mainland that they claim with some legitimacy
I went back
is the place to put this semiconductor industry?
I went back and read Bill Clinton, a New York Times article about what Bill Clinton was saying around the time of the WTO, and it is shocking what level of just incompetence informed that decision. And nobody wants to, make their own country. They live in that country, their grandchildren live in that country, and yeah, if they have a bunch of money, they know they'll be fine, but at the same time, they want to have a good historical legacy. Like, there's incentive to do a good job as president, and they really thought that was a good decision, truly thought that was a good decision, and that's because you have people chirping in your ear for whom it will immediately be a great decision. And
it's good for some of them.
Yeah, it's good for some of them. And just right before, it's just a terrifying fact to end this on, I read an analysis this week that if you get a new chip company in the United States from point A to point B, so starting construction, opening up the doors, 3 years. Think about that, and think about that in Xi Jinping's mind, because that doesn't leave us any room.
And one thing I learned from Doshai's book back when Clinton was doing that, their strategy had a name. It was called Hide Capabilities and Bide Time. Like that's what they named it, up through 2008. And after the 2008 financial crisis, like, all right, let's roll.
Yeah, we did great on that. We really read.
We've hidden capabilities enough.
So we saw right through that.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.